Ancient Earth Stories, uncovering the secrets of our past.
Have you ever stood alone in the early hush of dawn and felt the earth breathing? Not the wind, not the shifting air, but something slower, deeper, like an old heart beneath your feet, pulsing through sand and silence. In the Sahara, that silence is a language. It is not empty. It speaks. They say the dunes of Erg Chebi are not merely made of sand, but of slumber. The kind of sleep that only the oldest beings understand. Sleep so long it forgets its name.
Sleep so vast it becomes landscape.
In the village of Tazulait, where the sky turns crimson during moonrise and goats climb the cliff paths like drifting spirits, the elders tell of a djinn buried beneath those towering sands. Not a wicked djinn, nor kind, just old.
And quiet. And deeply alone. It is said he came before water left the land.
Before salt hardened into stone and the wind forgot which way to turn. His name is never spoken. It's not out of fear, but reverence. For this djinn did not roar, nor curse, nor haunt. He simply waited. Waiting, perhaps, for someone to sing to him again, or to forget him completely. In that village, long before your grandparents' grandparents were born, there lived a weaver named Yasra. She spun thread from the wool of dusk-coloured sheep, and wove patterns no one could name, swirls like sandstorms, eyes like stars, doorways with no walls. She was not young nor old, not married nor entirely alone, but she was waiting too, though she would never admit it. One night, under the blood moon, a child was born in Yasra's small clay home. The midwives said nothing, but one of them wept, for the wind had shifted. It no longer danced eastward like it always did. It moved west, toward the heart of the dunes. And the moment the child first cried, the dust outside lifted ever so slightly.
As if something under the sand had breathed in. The child was named Layla. Not for the night, as one might think, but for a lullaby Yasra once heard in her dreams. A song without words, sung by someone with no mouth,
carried on wind like incense. As Layla grew, strange things happened. Camels knelt without command when she passed. Shadows cooled her face even in noon's fire. And when she cried, which was rare, small whirlwinds would rise like dancers and swirl around her until she calmed. The villagers watched with wide, unspoken eyes. Some feared her. Some left gifts at her door. Some stopped speaking altogether, for fear a word might turn into sand in their mouths. At 6 years old, Layla wandered to the dunes, barefoot and silent. No one saw her leave. No one heard her go. But a shepherd boy tending his goats on the edge of the sands claimed he saw a girl walking into the wind. And the wind, for once, backed away. She did not return that night, nor the next. On the third day, Yasra followed her footsteps, though the dunes had tried to erase them. She did not bring water. She did not bring bread. Only a thread of wool, spun tight as a promise and tied around her wrist. The desert stretched out before her like a sleeping god, hot, vast, breathing. She walked for what felt like a full day of silence, but it was not silence.
There were voices, not loud ones, not cruel, just patient, like they had been waiting too long to shout.
They whispered in a tongue Yasra did not know but felt, in her throat,
in her knees,
in her marrow. At last she came upon Layla, standing alone in a hollow of the dunes. The child was gazing downward.
Not at her feet,
but at something deep, deeper than any eye could see. And Yasra felt it then. The breath beneath the earth. Slow, steady, ancient, like a bell tolling underwater. Layla turned and said simply, "He's lonely." Yasra did not ask who. She did not ask why. She only sat beside her daughter and held her hand. They stayed there until dusk turned to ink. When they returned, they said nothing of what had passed. But from that day onward, Layla began to hum.
Not songs she learned, but songs that came from somewhere else. Low, melancholy, full of dust and patience.
And the sands around the village grew calmer, fewer storms.
Softer winds, as if soothed. Years passed, Layla grew.
She became a healer and quiet, gentle, never hurried. She treated wounds with fingers like breath and whispered to fevers until they bowed. The old ones said her presence made the palms fruit heavier. The children said she could speak with camels, but each month, on the red moon, she would walk alone to the dunes. Sometimes she stayed the night. Always she returned humming. One year, a stranger came, a man with teeth too white and robes too bright. He called himself a scholar of spirits, claimed he came to learn the ancient ways, but his eyes were quick and hungry. He asked too many questions, touched stones he should not, drew sigils in the sand with iron. He insisted on seeing the hollow. Layla said no. He insisted again. She said no. And then, one evening, he followed her in secret. No one knew until the next morning when he did not return. A search was made. Only his robes were found, folded neatly on the edge of the dunes. His footprints ended mid-step, and the sand where he'd stood had sunk just slightly, like breath let go. Layla did not speak of it. But that night the wind turned fierce, not cruel, not wild, just loud like a warning. And beneath it, if one listened closely, there was a sound, deep and slow, like laughter that had not been used in centuries. After that, no one asked questions. Years turned to decades. Layla aged, but gently. She became the elder everyone came to. The children still left her small offerings, feathers, bits of glass, dried rose petals. She taught them how to listen to silence, how to sing without sound. On the night of her passing, the red moon rose again. She was wrapped in wool spun by her mother's hands and buried not in the village, but in the hollow, the place of breath, her final request. That night, the wind sang. It moved westward toward the heart of the dunes, and in every home the fire flickered once, then stood still. And in the dark, someone, no one knew who, began to hum a lullaby. Wordless, ancient, soft as sand. It is said that now, when a child is born beneath the red moon, the wind still shifts, and if you lie very still on the dunes of Erg Chebi, you may feel it, a breath beneath the earth. Not asleep,
Not awake.
just listening. Some say the Djinn remains there, cradled in silence, dreaming in the warmth of a remembered lullaby. And some say he is gone now, walking in the form of wind, looking for the only child who ever sang to him. But the desert does not explain itself. It only waits and hums. Have you ever seen heat shimmer like silver ghosts in the distance? Have you ever mistaken a reflection for a promise? The desert does not lie, but it does not always show the truth as we wish it. Out there, beyond the reach of known paths and the memory of wells, there is a city that no map can hold. Not because it is small or hidden, but because it never stays. One moment it stands with towers that catch the sun and drink it like water. The next, it becomes haze, vanishing like breath against glass. They say it is called a Jara, the city that drank the sky. Its legend is not told in markets or schools, but murmured in the hollows between stories. Not always as a warning, not always as a myth. Sometimes just as a question. Have you seen it?
The Jara was once a real place, they say.
A marvel carved from alabaster and glass, perched like a crown atop the spine of the earth. It reflected the heavens so perfectly that clouds hesitated above it.
unsure which was the sky and which was not, but that was long ago.
Before the forgetting, the story begins with a man named Isam, whose name meant mark in a language now faded like dew. He was not a prince or prophet, just a cartographer.
A map maker, one who traced the world by candlelight, by camel bone,
by echo. But Isam was also a dreamer, one of those quiet men who stare too long at reflections, who ask too often what lies just beyond the next rise of sand. His father had once seen a Jara, just for a moment, he claimed, after nearly dying of thirst in the Tanez Roofed, a city that shimmered on the edge of death, a city with no doors, only thresholds. Isam grew up chasing that vision.
Not to possess it.
Not even to prove it. Just to touch what had touched his father's soul, he gathered scraps.
Old scrolls from desert monks, symbols etched into antelope hide.
Songs sung by children in oases whose names even the stars had forgotten. Over time, the fragments formed a pattern. Not a clear path, but a rhythm, a pulse beneath the sand. He followed it. For years, he traveled alone, with only a small leather-bound map, his own hand-drawn sketches, and the memory of his father's eyes. The desert was not cruel to him, but it was not kind either. It asked him who he was again and again, in the language of thirst, silence, and endless repetition. And he answered, again and again, with footsteps and ink. On the 33rd day of his final journey, he saw it. Not a mirage, not a trick. He saw the light curve in an unnatural way, as if bent by memory. Towers stood like fingers pointing toward forgotten gods. Domes of glass flickered with what seemed like breathing a Jara. He did not run. He did not call out. He knelt. He wept. And then he entered. No gate stopped him. No guard challenged him. He simply crossed a threshold of dust and found stillness. Inside, the city was not dead.
Nor was it living.
It was remembering, the stones whispered. The water in the reflecting pools did not ripple, not even when he touched it. The air smelled of copper and jasmine, of sand and something older. He wandered, and as he did, he noticed strange things. His shadow walked beside him, but sometimes it pointed the wrong way. Mirrors lined the walls of every hall, but they never showed his face, only the faces of others. Birds sang, though there were no birds, and the sky above was darker than the sky outside. In the center of the city stood a tower, higher than any he had seen.
Not grand, not gold,
but perfect. It was made entirely of mirrors, hundreds, thousands, all angled upward toward the sun. Toward the sky, as he approached, a voice, not a voice, but a hush, came into his mind like a dream barely remembered. You seek the truth. He stopped. You seek to name what cannot be named. He trembled, and the hush whispered again. Then see, the mirrors tilted, and in them he did not see himself. He saw his father, as a boy, standing in the same place, then his father, older, looking back, then a reflection of Isam himself, not as he was, but as he would become. Older, dust-covered, eyes hollow, a map unfinished in his hands, and behind him, the city fading, and further still, nothing. Not sand, not sky, nothing. A Jara, the voice said, was not built to last. It was born of pride. Long ago, its builders believed they could reflect the heavens so purely. The gods would descend, and they did, but not with gifts. Not with joy, they came with silence. They erased the names of the builders, took their words, and left only the echo of longing. Your kind tries again and again to pin the sky in place, the voice whispered, but the sky is not a thing to hold. It is only to witness, and then the mirrors shattered, but the sound was not loud. It was soft, like sand falling through an hourglass. Isem awoke outside the city. The sun high, his map burned, his feet bleeding. He never found it again, but he drew it again and again from memory. Not its shape, but its feeling, its silence, its ache. He became known as the map-maker of absence, the one who drew cities that could not be found. And some who saw his maps said they recognized the shapes, in dreams, in dying moments, in reflections, and now, even today, there are whispers. Sometimes, in the hottest part of the day, a caravan will halt.
A scout will point.
And there, just there, on the horizon, towers, water, arches, a city of light. They run.
They find nothing, only heat and dust.
And their own breath, heavy with wanting, and yet sometimes one does not return. Sometimes a lone traveler keeps walking, keeps chasing the shimmer, keeps believing, and on those days the wind changes direction. Just slightly, not as a warning, but as an invitation. Silent transition, but the mirage fades, and further still, a caravan walks beneath a different curse. Have you ever listened to a silence so deep it feels like a stone resting on your chest? A silence so complete it swallows the sound of your own heartbeat? The desert is full of such silences, not empty, not lifeless, but waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to understand. In the salt-scorched paths between the Tassili and the Tanez Roofed, where no birds fly and no footprints remain by morning, there once moved a caravan unlike any other.
Not swift,
not grand, but unforgettable. They were called the Caravan of Thousand Echoes, and yet they never spoke. Their camels were lean and grey, their eyes black as obsidian, reflecting nothing. Their robes were the colour of forgotten dusk, stitched with thread too fine to catch the sun. Every 28 nights they passed through the edge of a known village, always at dusk.
Always heading south. They did not bargain with words. They did not request lodging. They did not speak a single sound, and yet
they traded blocks of salt carved with glyphs no scholar could read. Soft salt, pale as bone and smelling faintly of myrrh. In return, they took only silence, a full night of it. The villagers knew the rule. On the night of the caravan's arrival, no voices were to be raised. No drums, no songs, not even the laughter of children. If anyone broke the hush, the caravan would leave at once and would not return for 100 years. Why salt?
No one knew.
But the salt of this caravan never melted, never spoiled, and when placed under a tongue, it cured fevers and quieted grief. Some said it came from the salt bones of ancient sea spirits. Others said it was not salt at all, but the crystallized breath of a god who died in his sleep. No one asked until one did. Her name was Zara. She was 9 years old, too young to fear stories, too curious to stay quiet. Her mother braided her hair with small talismans and tucked a moon seed beneath her tongue, hoping to shield the girl's thoughts from wandering too far. But Zara had dreams that hummed. For nights before the caravan's arrival, she dreamt of a long road of salt gleaming beneath a sky with no stars. She dreamt of voices hidden in wind, of camels whose eyes blinked in unison, and of an old man walking at the front, wearing a veil of woven shadows. When the caravan came that season, the hush fell as always. But Zara could not hold the question in. As the leader of the caravan passed by her home, she stepped forward barefoot, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes wide with desert stillness, and she asked gently,
almost like a breath, "Where do you go when the stars fall?"
The silence trembled. The air shifted. The veiled man turned. He did not speak, but his eyes, dark as caves in forgotten hills, met hers. And then the caravan moved on. No salt was left that year. No trade was made. The hush lingered longer than it should have, even after the hoofbeats had faded. It clung to the village like dust in the mouth. That night, Zara began to dream in languages no one had taught her. Not words, exactly, but pulses, shapes, rhythms. Her sleep grew thick and strange. Her breath slowed, became long as tides. Her skin warmed like sun-kissed clay, even in cool dawns. She spoke little, but when she did, the wind seemed to pause to listen, and every night she drew in the sand, spirals, circles, roads with no ends. A year passed, then two. The villagers kept silent, not just from fear, but awe. One morning, Zara did not rise. She was found beneath the olive tree near the old well, asleep. But her eyes were open, gazing at something not there.
Not here. Her breath came slowly.
In and out, like tides of a sea no one had seen, a white crystal, shaped like a tear, lay in her palm. It was warm to the touch, but melted like smoke when her mother reached for it. That night,
Zara awoke. She said only one thing. I heard them. Her mother asked who. She smiled
faintly and replied, "The ones who carry silence." After that, Zara no longer stayed in the village. Each morning, she walked out into the dunes alone. She did not return until dusk, she did not explain. But plants began growing where she walked. Small ones, green, blooming in the sand. They called her the Salt Listener. And though she was still a child, no one doubted her. The goats followed her like shadows. The winds avoided her path. Old illnesses eased when she entered a home, but the caravan did not return, not after 1 year.
Not after 10. Still she waited, and then, one night,
when the moon hung low and gold, they came again. But not at the edge of the village. They came to her. No one saw it, only the faint prints in the sand outside Zara's home, and a salt stone left on her doorstep, etched with a single spiral. She followed them. She left no note, only a smooth stone beside her bed, carved with words no one could read. The village mourned her, softly. But every year after, at the time of the caravan's passing, a small bloom would appear outside the old well. Always the same, pale blue petals with veins of silver. It smelled of sea air and sleep. Some say she walks with the caravan now, barefoot.
Veiled in hush, some say she became the wind that moves ahead of them,
warning the earth to still itself, and some say she sleeps beneath the salt, dreaming a world where no questions are ever punished. But those who remember her voice, soft, curious, filled with desert quiet, know she was not lost. She became an echo, a new one, and so the caravan gained another echo that year.
Not spoken,
not sung, just remembered. And in the desert, that is the oldest way to speak. Silent transition, and in the hush, between footsteps, a voice calls from beneath a veil. Have you ever seen the desert dance?
Not shift, not drift, but truly dance.
There are nights when the winds do not rage, but twirl, when the dunes lift their veils in the moonlight, and the sands become a mirror for something older than movement. These are the nights when they say she appears. Not every traveller believes in her, but those who have seen her never doubt again. They call her the Bride of the Sandstorm, a figure veiled in dust and flame, who moves just ahead of the winds that blind. She is not storm, she is not sky. She is the breath between them, and she is always dancing. The Tuareg elders whisper of her in low voices, never by name. In the camps, when the air grows still and the goats grow restless, they say, "She's near." But who is she? Some say she was once a woman of flesh and heart, a daughter of a tribe that vanished under the sands. Others say she is no woman at all, but the sorrow of the desert itself shaped into longing. Her eyes are never seen, her voice never heard, but her steps, those are remembered by the wind. This is what the oldest tale says. Long ago, there lived a woman named Nuria. Her name meant light between shadows, and it was said that when she smiled, the fires in the camp glowed higher. She was beloved not for beauty, but for stillness. She listened to others as if they were made of stars. She moved through the camp like a hymn, with hands that stitched not only cloth, but the broken edges of others' sorrow. One night,
a stranger arrived. He came with nothing. No camel.
No water, only a single flute slung across his back. He called himself Azem, and he did not ask for shelter. He only sat by the edge of the fire and played. The music was unlike any song the tribe had known. It was not of this world. It had no melody, only longing. When Nuria heard it, she felt her breath stop, not in fear, but in recognition. It was the sound she'd heard in dreams, the sound of wind just before the rain that never came. It was the sound of goodbye Azem played every night, and each night Nuria came closer. They did not speak. Words would have broken it. But on the seventh night, when the moon was full and pale as bone, he reached out and touched her hand. The moment he did, the sand around them lifted, not in storm, but in hush. The fire bent low,
as if bowing, and the wind whispered a promise. They say the two fell in love without ever saying it. They walked the dunes together, her veil trailing like smoke,
his flute trailing silence. But joy is a dangerous thing in the desert. It wakes what should sleep. One night,
Azem played a note too pure, too sharp, too full. The sky cracked. A wind rose, not like any before. It tore through tents.
It lifted stones. It howled with the voices of the forgotten. And when it passed, Azem was gone. No blood, no breath, no trace, only his flute, half buried in sand, still warm. Nuria did not scream. She did not cry. She only picked up the flute and walked into the desert, and the winds followed. Since that night, she has never been seen in stillness, only in motion. Veiled in storm, crowned with lightning, she dances. They say she moves ahead of every sandstorm, her steps calling the winds to follow. Some say she is searching for Azem, calling him back with the rhythm of her feet. Others say she has become the storm, that her grief is what powers the gales. But one man tells another story, a harpist named Samir. He was not a traveller, nor brave. He was quiet, unsure, and prone to tears. His village was swept by sand one bitter season, and he alone remained. Clutching his harp, he walked, guided by memory and sorrow. For days he wandered, his fingers strumming songs not meant to be sung, just remembered. One night, the wind rose. He braced for death, but it was not death that came, it was her. She moved down the slope of the dune like mist. Her veil shimmered with stars. Her feet did not touch the ground, but her body sang, not with voice, but with presence. Samir did not run. He played a single string, a single note, a broken offering, and she stopped. For the first time, the storm halted mid-breath, and she turned her
Head, not all the way, just enough for
him to see a flicker of golden eyes behind the veil, eyes full of
memory. Then she vanished. The
storm passed around him like a sigh. In the sand, where she had stood, there was a mark, not a footprint, but the shape of a circle crossed with an arrow. The old ones said it was an ancient sigil, dance of reunion. Samir returned, changed. He never spoke of her again, but in every village he wandered through, he taught one song, a slow, winding melody with no end, no chorus, just steps, and when played during storms, it is said the wind eases, just slightly. Some say Nuria still dances, trapped in longing. Others say she dances because she has become joy itself, too vast to hold still. And some say, when she finally finds the place where Azam vanished, the winds will stop. Not forever, but just for a moment. Long enough for her to rest. Long enough for the desert to remember how to love without hurting. So if you ever find yourself in a storm, a true one, with sand thick as blindness and wind sharp as shame, listen, there may be music in it, and if you feel a rhythm under your feet, do not run. It is not danger, it is grief, turned graceful. It is the desert remembering its bride. Silent transition, but hush. Beyond the sandstorm's breath, an older name stirs awake. Have you ever wondered what happens to names forgotten by time? Names spoken once, twice, then swallowed by silence? In the vast Sahara, names are not just sounds. They are power. They are breath. To lose a name is to lose a part of your soul. Beneath a crescent of dunes, where the wind moves slow and heavy like morning, lies the Ibrahim Vault. It is said to be sealed not by locks or stones, but by 7 whispered names, names never to be spoken aloud. The vault is older than any living memory, yet its shadow stretches far, touching the edges of dreams and waking alike. No one knows exactly what lies inside. Some say it is a library of souls, a place where the desert keeps the stories of those who tried to own it. Others say it is a prison holding voices that should never escape. The tribes speak of it in riddles. They say if you stand on the crest of the highest dune at midnight and listen, you can hear the faint echo of names, like a chant carried by wind, but fading before the syllables reach your lips. A young scribe named Malik was drawn to this mystery. He was not brave or bold, quiet, curious, and weighed by questions that had no answers. Malik's father was a storyteller, weaving words into cloth and song. But Malik was different. He sought to write what was forgotten, to capture silence before it disappeared. One evening, under a sky thick with stars, an old man appeared at Malik's door. His face was lined like cracked stone, and his eyes held the weight of countless sunsets. He spoke with a voice like wind through dry leaves. "You are chosen," he said, "to inscribe the final name." Malik did not understand. Chosen for what? He asked. To write the name that will open the vault, or close it forever. The old man handed Malik a thin scroll, its edges brittle as dried grass. On it, a single word was written, unreadable by any language Malik knew. "Do not speak it," the man warned. "Not even in your heart." That night, Malik dreamt of the vault. Its gates were made of silence, its walls were shadows. Inside, a flickering flame danced, casting shapes that twisted and whispered. He saw faces in the flame, faces he did not know but felt deeply. They were trapped between breath and stillness. Malik awoke, with the scroll burning softly in his hands. He felt a name crawling beneath his skin, like a shadow stretching just out of reach. The next day, he set out for the vault. The journey was slow and heavy. The sun burned low as he reached the crescent dune where the vault was said to lie. There, a hollow opened. A black mouth in the sand. Malik hesitated. The air smelled of dust and forgotten prayers. He stepped inside. The darkness was thick, but not empty. He heard a voice. Soft, cracked, almost lost. "Who comes?" Malik answered with his own name. "Why?" "To remember," the voice sighed. Names are not always what they seem. They are weight and breath. They are beginning and end. As Malik moved deeper, he saw shadows writhe and shimmer, figures shaped from dust and memory. They whispered names in loops, names that twisted like smoke. He realized the vault was not just a place, it was a living echo, held those who had lost their names, those who had tried to hold the desert and were swallowed by it.
Malik reached the heart of the vault. A stone pedestal
held an empty scroll. The old man's words came back to him to write the final
name. His hands trembled. He traced letters he did not know. The air shivered. The shadows
gathered. The vault pulsed. Malik saw himself reflected in the flames, and then the emptiness. The name he wrote was his own, and the vault opened. Not to freedom, but to understanding. He saw that names are not chains, but keys, that to forget is not to die, but to become part of the wind, the breath. Beneath the earth, Malik stepped out as dawn spilled across the
dunes. The vault closed behind him with a whisper. No,
one saw. But the wind carried a new name that day. One spoken only in silence, silent transition, and yet still, across centuries and silence, one song remains. Have you ever heard a sound so faint it seems to come from the edges of sleep? A melody that slips like water through the cracks of memory. The desert keeps such sounds, whispered on the wind, carried on the breath of the forgotten. There is a story told among the Tuareg, beneath the vast tapestry of stars, of a flute unlike any other, not made of wood or bone, but of moonlight trapped in crystal. It is said the flute can call the lost, soothe the restless, and even sing the desert itself to sleep. The flute belonged to a woman named Amira. Her name means princess, but she was no royal. She was a wanderer, a dreamer, a keeper of songs that no one else could hear. Amira was born under a moon that vanished for 7 nights. The villagers whispered that the moon had hidden because it mourned her birth. She was different.
Eyes like silver wells.
Voice like the hush before dawn. From the moment she could hold breath, Amira made music, but not with her voice. With the flute, no one knew where the flute came from. Some said it was a gift from the Djinn beneath the dunes. Others said it was the last breath of a star. Amira played her flute every night. The melody was not a song, but a story without words, a story of longing, of shadows, of light caught and lost. One evening, as she played, the desert stirred. The sands around her rose, not in storm, but in dance. The wind carried her music far, beyond the dunes, beyond the villages, beyond the stars, and it awakened something. From the deepest silence,
a figure came, not a man, not a beast, but a shadow woven of moonlight and mist. He was called Lahim, the Forgotten One. He had once been a guardian of the desert,
a keeper of balance between light and dark, but long ago he was betrayed by those he trusted. They erased his name. They erased his song, and with it, they erased his existence. He became nothing but a shadow, a whisper, a breath lost in the sands, but Amira's flute called him back. He came to her, not with words, but with presence, a quiet that filled the space between notes. Together, they danced on the edge of dreams. Amira played, and Lahim moved. The desert listened for 7 nights. They danced beneath the sky that had once hidden its face. On the 7th night, the moon returned, full and bright, spilling silver over the dunes. But as dawn approached, Lahim faded. He looked at Amira, eyes full of sorrow and light. He whispered, "Without sound, remember me," and with that he vanished. Amira was left alone, her flute still singing the last note. She understood then that some songs are not meant to be held, only released, that some shadows must walk alone. But she kept the flute and the story. She taught others the melody, not the notes, but the feeling of longing,
of loss, of hope wrapped in silence. And now,
when the wind shifts on moonlit nights, some say you can hear the flute's song, a sound that is both there and not, a call to those who are lost. A lullaby for the desert, a promise whispered on the breath of the forgotten moon, silent transition, and so the night deepens, carrying stories in its arms, waiting to unfold one last time.
have you ever seen something so beautiful, so impossible, that your breath forgot its rhythm? A shimmer on the horizon.
A flicker of gold and green in a place where nothing should grow. The desert holds these dreams like a child holds a dying flame. And when you chase them, you do not find water or fruit or salvation. You find memory. You find yourself. They call it the last mirage, a place that appears only once every 100 years, seen only by those who are about to be lost forever. It is said that this mirage is not born of thirst or heat or delusion. It is a test, a mirror of the soul, and in this story, the one who saw it was a man named Idris. He was not a seeker of myths. He was not a thief of treasures. He was simply tired, a trader whose caravan had been swallowed by a storm. Camels lost, companions scattered like grains in the wind, alone, sun-blind, and walking into silence. Idris stumbled across the impossible, a grove. Yes, palm trees, real and tall, pools of still water that reflected not just the sky, but something deeper, walls of alabaster.
Domes the color of pearl. He rubbed his eyes.
But it remained. He stepped into the mirage, and the air changed. No heat, no hunger, just hush. There were no people, only echoes of them, shapes that moved behind veils,
Laughter that seemed to come from within his own chest, and in the center of the city. A well, he looked into it, expecting water, but
he saw not his face, he saw
memories, his mother humming beneath stars, his
brothers' laughter on a dune they once climbed, a promise he had. Broken, a love he had left. The well showed him all that he had forgotten, not just facts, but feelings. And above the well, written in silver script, drink and forget again, or turn and remember, he did not drink. Instead, he wept for all that was lost, for all he had buried. And as his tears fell, the mirage began to shift. The walls breathed, the domes melted into sky, the pool turned into a mirror of sand, and the well sang. It sang in a voice not of man or woman, but of wind. You have remembered, and so you may return. Idris woke beneath a fig tree, real. His skin burnt, but his soul somehow cooled. He was found days later by a nomad girl who spoke little, but whose eyes were old. When he told her what he had seen, she simply nodded and said, "Not all thirst is for water." He lived the rest of his days as a quiet man, no longer a trader of goods, but a gatherer of songs. He told no one where the last mirage lies, for it cannot be found with maps or steps, only with silence and sorrow and truth. They say the last mirage still appears to those who have wandered too far from their own hearts. A garden of memory, a city of almosts, a place where the wind sings your name and offers you a choice: drink and forget again, or turn.
And remember, silent farewell, the winds have hushed now.
The sand has settled, the stories sleep. Let us leave them wrapped in the veil of silence, where dreams and truth entwine.